later, but one thing that I would love for the group to consider tonight is when we're talking about recreation, and especially in relation to the community of Neskowin, because you do have a commercial district, you have had some growth, and the amenities that you do have in your community, in your commercial district, are really special. And there's more things perhaps coming your way, because as we know, there are some areas that have yet to be developed that are zone commercial. So more opportunities exist in the future. But as we're talking about recreation and we're listening to our panelists tonight, one of the things that would be great, Susan, I'm coming in because I see some people leaning. So I want to make sure everybody can hear me. But one of the things that I think is important to think about as we're listening to our panelists are, what is the relationship between recreation and our economy? And not just in the sense of the tourism industry, but there are other economic benefits to recreational amenities and recreation goals that really benefit everybody in the community. It's not just about our guests and our residents, it's about what they offer our community residents as well. And then again, I'll circle back around to that, but just something to think about while you're listening to everybody. So I will go ahead and start with Michelle Yank. Michelle is a longtime friend and someone who has dedicated her life and her career to healthy communities and doing things and being a part of organizations and actions and movements that benefit our communities, especially from a physical health, wellness, and recreation area. And so I'll go ahead and turn the floor over to her. So Michelle, if you could please introduce yourself and then talk about a little bit about what you see as those recreational benefits for the community of Neskowin in relation to what you do professionally.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so blown away by all of the people on this meeting, and I'm so excited to connect with all of you. I've lived in Tillamook County for 25 years, and there aren't very many names that I recognize, and that's very telling to me that I have work to do to be better connected to our South County residents. So I hope that I get to meet all of you in the future. So as Sarah said, my name is Michelle Yank, and many of you down there may see some green hay trucks rolling by. That is my husband's family's dairy farm and trucking operation, Yank Farms. If you've seen those vehicles, that's my other half, and spent a big part of my life in Tillamook County just being a stay-at-home mom and working as a YMCA fitness instructor. About 2013, I went back to school, got a master's of education in health and kinesiology because I became really, really motivated to do something more and have a greater impact in my community around health and well-being outside of just teaching classes through our YMCA and our community college. And through that experience and subsequently through an opportunity to get really deeply involved in population health improvement, I've really come to see something really special around recreation and the opportunities that it affords to us as residents of Tillamook County around not only the tourism industry and the economic development impacts of that, but more largely the community livability factor, and that healthier people, healthier residents live longer, better lives. They save our healthcare system a lot of money if they can be active, and if activity is convenient and accessible and affordable to people, they're more likely to engage in it. There's a ton of research out there around that. So my role in Tillamook County is twofold. One is since August of this year, I have been the new Community Wellbeing Director at Adventist Health Tillamook. That is a new position and a new division for our entire Western region as a hospital system. The goal of community well-being has been elevated and resourced to a significant degree because it is now so well understood that health, a person's health largely is impacted outside of the hospital and clinical walls. And so having somebody like myself active in the community, building up relationships and infrastructure to support a built environment that supports people being physically active, food systems that support people's access to healthy and nutritious foods, all those things, housing. I'm serving on the Housing Commission as the large employer representative, or as one of the large employer representatives on behalf of my organization. These are all social determinants of health, and they cumulatively add up to a lot of what we're currently paying through tax dollars to, meet the needs of many people socially, whether it's healthcare or social services or other things that are related to people not being well. So my role is really unique, and it's very new, and it's not top of mind for most people to think about recreation and the recreation industry in these terms. So I'm really excited to have this audience to share this with, because I think it's really important that we really understand holistically how all of this fits together. The other role that I play and have been playing since 2015 is I serve as the Tillamook County Wellness Coordinator, and that is a partnership with our public health department. So that organization has an advisory board that's appointed by our county board of commissioners, and it's all predicated on the same thing that I just explained, this whole social determinants of health and how all of that feeds into so many different things that relate to community livability and economic development. So the overarching goal for Tillamook County Wellness is to reduce pre-diabetes and other risk factors related to chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes. It's a very intentional selection, because the more upstream we work, the more different health impacts that we can have, including preventing many forms of cancer and stroke and heart disease, and improving mental health. So using research-based and evidence-informed practices and with partnerships with OHSU and OSU, we've developed an entire framework around this that's been being deployed over the last 5 years. We have 5 action committees, and one of them, I think probably Arica may speak to, but I'll touch on it here and let her fill in the gaps, and Josh as well, is a committee called Access to Physical Activity. And that group started convening around just increasing opportunities for people that live in Tillamook County to be more physically active. And of course, the built environment plays a huge role in that. So whether people have sidewalks to walk on, or community paths that connect up to hiking trails, or have the ability to park somewhere to get to those places, whatever it might be, those are all really relevant to making sure that residents have convenient and safe and affordable access to being active. So that group's been meeting for many years, and they have worked very collaboratively with, in fact, the U.S. Forest Service has been a really, really active partner in that, and they've been developing some projects with partners that Josh, I think, will be speaking to as well. There are walking groups that meet regularly throughout the county, including in Pacific City. But really the big project that we're really proud of and is just about ready to go public is we were able to secure funding for collaboratively for a GIS intern to map all of our recreational assets in Tillamook County, everything from hiking trails to boat launches to there's so much, I can't believe that. There's like hundreds and hundreds of points of interest on this map that Sam Goodwin has put together over the last year. And it's a very detailed, layered, fully integrated map with whether or not you can take a dog to this location, or if there's bathrooms, or if it's ADA accessible. There's pictures, there's a lot of information built into the database that she created. And through part of this collaborative effort, Visit Tillamook Coast will be hosting this map, and they're in the process right now of transitioning it from its current database format into a user-friendly interface that it will be available on their website. And we'll be also sharing it through the Tillamook County Wellness website. So one of the things that I constantly find myself talking about in forums like this is the interconnectivity between tourism for people coming here to use these natural resource assets that we have, and the ability for our own residents to take advantage of and have some empowerment in what is being planned for how these things are developed and used. The other really important thing, and I think again, I'm just going to keep teeing up Arica and Josh, but I think Arica really can speak. Go team! Can speak to this. The stewardship has been a big piece of all of the collaborative planning and discussion that's been taking place over the last 5 years. There are groups like the Tillamook Estuaries Partnership and their programming, like with Explore Nature, that are looped into all of these conversations. There's organizations like the Working Lands Group, that there's a lot of opportunity for us to educate the public. I'm married to a dairy farmer. There is no greater need than to educate people about what dairy farming really consists of and to help people understand that these practices are humane and safe, and that everyone has the best interests of the land and the animals involved. So by working collaboratively with different sectors, we've been able to build programming around that and roll that out for both our local residents, but also for the tourism side of things. And there's a tremendous amount of synergy at the ground level and a lot of thoughtful and intentional collaboration around some of those goals. I could speak to more of it, but I feel like I want to just step back and just say, just allow people to ask questions of me and give Arica and Josh some time to talk about some of the projects that are happening around all of this.
Thank you, Michelle. That was very, very informative. I've got a question for you if you have a minute. One of the deliverables of the NCAC is a community plan that's used by the county commissioners for land use planning and zoning. Neskowin is limited by zoning and space. We currently have a golf course, RV park, beaches, and public forest land. Based on this, what sort of questions would you like for us to consider when we develop our community survey based on Goal 8? And that survey is what will drive what's included in our community plan.
I'm not as familiar with the processes that you all have been going through to be able to speak intelligently, honestly, to this question. I think from my perspective, from the county public health, population health, community well-being perspective, is how are we considering our own local utilization of these resources and meeting local needs while we're also planning for the tourism related, economic development related. Ideally, honestly, my opinion, we should be putting those before, that should be an initial criteria or lens that we're looking through before we look at the economic development, tourism industry related objectives. Because one of the things I didn't speak to is for us to be able to survive as a natural resource dependent and tourism dependent economy is a workforce. We have to build a place where people want to live and where they feel there's a place for them that cares about them. And so developing these spaces and making plans around those and working around the challenges that we have with zoning in Oregon, but with those considerations in mind, and what are the workarounds? What can we do? Those are things that I'm constantly reminding ourselves to ask in our own work. I don't know if that was helpful.
No, that is. Thank you.
Ready to move on, Chris? Any more questions?
One question came through the chat, the chat window for Michelle. How does one get in touch with a walking group to join?
It's a great question. So we have a website, TillamookCountyWellness.org. And under that, there are 5 tabs, and one of them is Move Well. And under the Move Well tab, there is a walking groups page that has information about all the walking groups. And it's just about to get updated. Cool fun fact, sidebar here for you. In April is National Move More Month, and the first Wednesday in April is National Walking Day. So it's the official relaunch, reboot every year for our walking groups that do walk year round. And we are following COVID restrictions, just so you know that as well. But this year, the Access to Physical Activity group and the volunteer coordinator for that program, they're working out having kind of walk and talks. So bringing civic leaders and community people, if maybe some of you are involved in things that would be interesting to talk to folks about on these walks, to connect, build connectivity, build community. That's what this is really all about. Everything that I do is about building community. So just so you know, there are some added elements to these walking groups in this year that will be rolling out. If that's of interest to you, we'll be updating information on that page to reflect some of that information soon.
Hey, Chris, I also have one question as we get into more specifics, which is thank you so much for your time tonight, Michelle. My name's Sarah. And I'm just curious, as we launch on this process, which is, you know, a lot of civic engagement and thought about our community and multiple year journey that we're kicking off here, as we orient around this, and some of us new to the process, what are like common pitfalls? What are things that it's not obvious to think about that you would suggest we're thinking about, or places that you see are typically natural places of tension we should be aware of and prepare to work through? Just what's your experience with that in council?
Thank you, Sarah, with respect to the statewide planning goals and then the recreation needs. Yeah, that's a great question. I'll tell you what, I'm gonna wrap that back around actually at the end, because I think that'll tie in nicely after we listen to the other panelists share with us what they've got going on. A great question.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we did have another question come through the chat box. Can you comment on the impact of paid parking spaces in Pacific City and how that impacts recreation? So I'm not sure if that's within the scope of this discussion. Sarah, I'll let you speak to that.
So thank you, Chris. Just briefly, because I think it's probably, we should be conscientious of not steering the panel completely towards this issue. I know this is a really important issue for our communities, and it's also been a bit of a contentious issue. And I definitely want to make sure that the conversation tonight doesn't go in that direction. But what I would say is I think that the reason why the volunteer part for the parking pass was included in the county's parking fee structure was because it was recognized that every opportunity needs to be made for our community residents to be able to use those places and to enjoy those recreational amenities with the benefits. The reality is that, you know, the Parks Department revenue is needed to maintain what we have and what we need. And so that's one piece of it. But the other piece of it is for those members of our communities that maybe can't afford to pay for that pass, or, you know, concerned about limitations for our community residents to be able to park in these areas and enjoy these areas. That volunteer programs through the County Parks Department has been very successful, and people are taking advantage of it. And not only are they going out and helping to work on our park areas, but that's another way to build community. And we've seen some great outcomes from that. So if anyone is worried about not being able to get that parking pass, my recommendation would be to reach out to Tillamook County Parks Department. they're putting together more of those volunteer opportunities, and it's an amazing program. So, and hopefully that will help address those concerns of our residents that want to be able to access these areas that perhaps right now for various reasons don't feel like they can.
And I can just add to that, that we are looking at ways for the Oregon Health Plan members, for example, to make sure that people, I'm actually in conversations with the, if you're not familiar, the Oregon Health Plan is a Medicaid insurer for our region, well, for our state. But anyway, I'm working with the coordinated care organization to look at options for covering that for people who are interested and cannot participate in some other way. So those are the kinds of things, that's the level of detail that these collaborative efforts are diving into, which is really important, I think, because I think we need the revenue, and we need the volunteer opportunities, and we need the subsidized parking passes where it makes sense.
I have one more question for Michelle before we move on. Hi, Michelle, as part of your mapping project, very cool in quotes, did you say there will be a website that shows these places we can all visit and stay healthy?
Indeed. I think that the launch window is expected to be late spring. So I'm going to throw out an April ? Day. We'll probably have an update here in another few weeks on this, but visit Tillamook Coast, the destination management organization for Tillamook County, is going to be the web host for that map, that primary resource. And then we'll be sharing either a link or, if it's possible, a page onto the Tillamook County Wellness Move Well page as well. So there'll be a couple of ways that people can access it for sure.
Great, thank you.
Chris,
Sarah, I'll turn it over.
Oh,
yes.
Alex Zifford has posted goal 8 the way it is in our current community plan, so people can see in the chat what the current plan says and how that relates to Nescoin. And that's kind of helpful to give an orientation to how this relates to the current plan, and then what we may configure for the coming plan.
Thanks, Fran. Sarah, I think we're ready to introduce the next presenter.
Thank you, Chris. I would like to introduce everyone to Josh Venti. Josh was one of the founders, the founder or co-founder of Tillamook Off-Road Trail Alliance, that was founded a couple of years ago with the goal in mind to continue to build community in Tillamook County by way of trailways. So Josh, welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. And we are very excited to learn more from you about what you do and how that fits in with the Nescoin community and the recreation goals of how we move forward with our community plan.
Yeah, hello everybody, some familiar faces out there. I am Josh Venti, as Sarah was saying, and co-founder of TORDA, Tillamook Off-Road Trail Alliance. We were formed back in March of 2018. And our mission mainly is to just get the community involved, create wellness within Tillamook County, and give people opportunity to use the land that, you know, as far as we're concerned, more mountain bike specific, but, you know, get out and use the land and create community wellness and access to our forests here. So, you know, to be honest with you, I wasn't really expecting to be a speaker. I was more here to like hear what was happening, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to listen to what's happening. I feel as though, you know, Tillamook County over the years has certainly changed tremendously, you know, going from an industry of, you know, logging and agriculture, moving more into tourism. And, you know, that being said, you know, more recently, I feel, you know, Tillamook County has gone from a tourism promotion, you know, to more of a tourism maintenance plan. As most of us here in South Tillamook County know, there are a lot of weekends where we can't find a place to park and the, in the waysides, parking areas here in Tillamook or in Pacific City and in Neskowin. And the shoulders of the roads are all taken up by people parking. And so I guess it's a double-edged sword, one side of the sword being people are here. They love to be in the outdoors and take advantage of these beautiful opportunities we have, the beaches we have, the trails we have. But at the same time, getting these people so they're out into other areas that aren't being utilized right now is part of this maintenance plan that Tillamook is forming at this point. That being said, we have obviously recreational user groups that are here, surfers, hikers, road riders as far as mountain bike or riders, bikers, and waterway trails being utilized at this point. But there was not very many mountain bike trails here locally. So our group got together and really saw this need. Tillamook County saw it as a huge asset, and it awarded us some of the Tillamook Transit Lodging Tax to help promote some of the trails that we are putting in, which is about 30 miles of mountain bike trails, about 4 miles north of Pacific City. So we're going through the NEPA process right now with National Forest. There's 18,500 acres of National Forest that we're utilizing for this phase one of our build out, which the working name is called the Buzzard Butte Trail Network. And, we're really close, hopefully, to getting through that NEPA process and beginning to be able to build mountain bike trails here in Pacific City. That being said, once again, dispersing that user group that is already here in Pacific City, kind of congesting the parking lot in Pacific City, giving them other opportunities, to get out and see this beautiful land that we all, greatly appreciate. And also giving giving an option for our youth to go out and, find other opportunities here, another ways to get outside, get off the tablets, and do things that are a lot of fun, and don't cost a lot of money. So open for questions. Sorry, I don't have a lot more to present right off the bat, but I'm just kind of winging it. Like I said, I wasn't expecting to be a speaker, but I'm happy to be here and happy to answer any questions.
So Chris, I could actually help Josh out a little bit. So Josh, part of recreation planning is looking at suitability of sites and environmental protection or enhancement measures, right? And you mentioned that you're going through a NEPA review. Could you explain to everybody what that is and why you're doing that? Because I think that ties in nicely to some of the components of planning and when we're looking at recreational needs and where they're appropriate.
Sure. So NEPA is the environmental study that a national forest and a lot of the public lands have to go through to create access for user groups like myself, like TORDA, hikers. If you wanted to have a hiking trail, they would have all of their ologists go through, take a look at what we're proposing and see what sensitivities might be out there that might have you change the route of a trail, or potentially might have to just move the trail entirely, so that way it's not going through these sensitivities. So it's something that we're new to. This is our first NEPA program or process that we're going through, and certainly working with our national forest has been a learning experience that I feel as though is kind of going to make it the next time, the next process we go through this, a much easier process for TORDA. I feel, we're learning the language, and there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of master degrees that have spent their whole lives, kind of creating, these protections for good reasons, and how to work with them so we make sure we're not disturbing the land in a negative manner, but helping create a benefit to the community, and also kind of highlighting nature.
Hey, Josh, a question came in. If you could share with us the great work with the new trail behind Shore Pines in Pacific City.
Sure. So Pacific City Pathways was a 501c3 that had some money that they were going to be building trails within Pacific City, and I think their mission statement was to expand the shoulder of the roads in Pacific City, so it created safer access for people as they were trying to get to the beach. Obviously, if anybody's been into Pacific City within the last 10 years, people are parking along the sides of the road, and so creating more of a shoulder just essentially creates more parking for people. So they just saw that as a plan that wasn't going to work well. When TORDA began and was looking for a 501c3, we spoke with the people from Pacific City Pathways, and they had already budgeted a certain amount of money to create this trail behind Dory Point and the new park that's going in with the skate park. And they were looking. They had kept all the credentials of the nonprofit in place and up to date, but they were looking for a way to get out of it. But they had some funds that they needed to create this trail, and so they looked to us as somebody that was looking for a 501c3, and they let us walk into that 501c3. And as long as we came through and helped them out with this trail, the Pacific City Pathways Trail there behind the park. It was a really fun project, actually, and a beautiful trail. It's about a mile long, and it's got some great views up there of Haystack Rocks and different perspectives that a lot of us haven't seen. There's a sitting bench up there, and eventually it'll be tied into the park, giving it a proper trailhead. Right now, it's somewhat difficult to find the trailhead to the space, to this walking trail. It's all going to eventually tie into the park, which doesn't have a gate access to the public yet. But people have found it, and it's being utilized, which is fantastic. And it was a great project to kind of bring our involvement into the community as far as TORDA, and give the community something right off the bat while we're going through the NEPA process, which can have a number of delays as we go through that process, and be able to create these mountain bike trails for the community.
Great. I'm going to have to check those out. A question came in the chat window, and I know a lot of us are thinking about balancing nature with recreation. And the question is, can you speak, and this is probably more for Sarah, this will certainly be interweaved throughout our community plan as part of the survey, but it says, can you speak more to the issue of publishing data on the recreational amenities and the obvious increase in users that will result? Was that anticipated as part of this effort? And how will that impact the resources and the ability for local users to continue to enjoy these local amenities? Sarah, did you have any response to that?
So thank you, Chris. I am trying to, okay, sorry, I heard you. I just want to make sure I got it right. So so I think what the question is really getting to is, do we have a way to track user capacity and measure the increase in user capacity? Is that what I'm reading? And that how will that impact resources and the ability for local users to continue to enjoy these local amenities? So is that essentially, how are we going to track the growth in the interest of the users and the visitors that are coming? And how do we balance that in making sure that there's opportunities for local residents to also be able to enjoy these amenities? Is that what I'm, okay.
Right.
Okay, thank
right.
you. Gosh, that is an excellent question. And I actually think that there are people that can probably answer that directly. It is not me. That might be something through the work that the Year of Wellness that Michelle is doing, and also Oregon Coast Visitors Association, which Arica is here, and possibly Josh, with monitoring the activity for their trail with users that they could better answer. But I definitely think that's an important question. So I don't know, does anybody else want to take us? Do you want to wait for that and answer that later? Do you want to go ahead and do that now?
Yeah, maybe we should wait for it, and that way it'll allow some of us to think more about it and respond intelligently, maybe towards the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. That's excellent question.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we ready to move on to our final panelist?
Let me see here. I'm looking through the chat window right now. The PC trail is on our map. It was from Michelle. The map is also intended to dilute dispersed tourism by highlighting lesser known amenities. And a big thank you goes out to Josh and Torta for your great vision. So that's all the questions. So I think we're ready to move on.
Okay, excellent. So last but certainly not least is Arica Sears. So some of you may know her. She grew up right up the street from you guys in Tierra del Mar. So Arica is the Deputy Director of the Oregon Coast Visitors Association. And there's a lot of great work that she is working on with ACVA. So I'll go ahead and let her have the floor and finish her own introduction and share with us what she's got going on.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sarah. Thank you all for having me. Can everybody hear me okay? Can do nods maybe? Okay,
yes.
I'm a pretty loud talker. So actually to do my introduction, I'm gonna do it a little bit differently by sharing a book with you that I just read that is so incredibly relevant to this conversation. I will put a link to it in the chat when I'm done talking. But I just read it about 2 weeks ago, and it's called Persistent Callings, Seasons of Work and Identity Along the Oregon Coast. And it was recommended to me. It's specifically about South Tillamook County, including Nescoen. And it starts with the history of our area, the tribes that lived here, the seasonality of how they worked, how our towns were formed, how the commercial fishing fleet was formed. And then it's really focusing on the conflict between the commercial fishing industry and recreational needs, and talking about tourism, which started in the 1890s in the area, and how farming and commercial fishing and tourism interact with each other up until now, and some of the strains of that, some of the excitement. So for those of you who've lived here for a really, really long time, you'll get such a kick out of it because you'll recognize some of the names. You'll recognize the names of the people are now the names of the beaches and the names of our roads. For those of you who haven't lived here for very long, it provides us really great context to our area and some of the conflicts that you see sometimes, or the conversations you have with people and you're like, why are we in a conflict about this right now? It gives really wonderful local context specifically to Nescoen, Pacific City, Sand Lake, Cloverdale. So I highly recommend. The reason that I really got a kick out of it is, as Sarah mentioned, I'm a 4th generation resident of Tierra del Mar. So every generation of my family, since my great grandparents have grown up in Tierra del Mar and have lived here. So we have this one little mile stretch of beach that we loved, but one of my first jobs was cleaning vacation rental houses in Nescoen. My dad's first job, he was the maintenance groundskeeper at Proposal Inn there in Nescoen. So we're your neighbors, and we love Nescoen greatly. Additionally, I'm very interested and concerned about the identity of our communities in South Tillamook County. I'm on the board of the Kiwanda Community Center and of the Doryman's Association. And it just keeps me up at night wondering what's going to happen with the next generation. How do we keep cultural heritage alive? How do we engage all these different generations living in our communities? So that's kind of who I am. But I think the reason I was invited, as Sarah mentioned, is I am the Deputy Director of the Oregon Coast Visitors Association. So we are the official agency designated by the state of Oregon to manage tourism along the entire Oregon coast, 363 miles. So I have the pleasure of working with a number of different partners like Josh and Michelle, but local communities, agencies like state parks, ODFW, Fish and Wildlife, cities, basically anybody with a stake in tourism. We are talking, we're communicating, and we work on a number of different things, especially like outdoor recreation, training our workforce, doing customer service training, providing the technical resources around how to run your website, how to apply for grants. So when we are looking at the Oregon coast, we kind of split it up into 3 subregions. Nescoen falls into the North Coast, according to the way we look at our map. And then we have a Central Coast and a South Coast. And the North Coast is really under what we call a destination management lens. So you don't see us saying like, hey, come to Nescoen. Hey, come to Nescoen. It's July, you should come to Nescoen, because we already have so many visitors in Nescoen. So when we're having this conversation today around outdoor recreation, it's really a lot different than the conversation I would be having with somebody on the South Coast who would be asking me, how can we get more visitors here? How can we get more people to come here? When we're talking about Nescoen, we're saying, wow, we have a lot of people here right now. So how can we think about the future of this community and what outdoor recreation can and should look like? So that is really briefly my work. It is constantly changing. It depends on what's going on in our communities. COVID definitely changed what people were talking about, but it's a very exciting job. I have to try to keep up with everybody virtually from my office in Tillamook. So a couple of things just based off the way that you have been asking questions around outdoor recreation, and maybe some things to consider if you're doing a community survey. There's a couple of things that came to mind when I started thinking about this. The first has to do with diversity. This has been a very hot topic of the past year about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it's really been something that's been important in outdoor recreation since before all of the movements of this year. So a very specific example would be before COVID happened, I was talking with Oregon State Parks around the design of our campgrounds and how we have different communities that enjoy our outdoor recreation space. So maybe my family likes to do something outside during the day, and then we have dinner, and by 9 o'clock we're in our tents and we're going to sleep. Well, there's different communities like the Latinx or the Latino community that maybe they start having dinner at 9 p.m. and they have bigger parties and just more people in their group. But the way that the campgrounds are currently designed is that the communal dining areas are right next to the tent areas. So we're creating conflict. So I would definitely take into consideration, if we're considering new outdoor recreation assets, how can we be welcoming to a number of different types of group in our communities. There is tons of data and research out there showing that we are having more and more diversity in the workplace. We have more generations in the workplace. So looking ahead to the future of Nescoen, how can we set up ourselves for success now so that in 15 years, we're not like, oh, why didn't we design our park differently? Why did we decide to have the bonfire pits next to the whatever it is? Something else worth considering is that we saw last summer, due to COVID-19 and the fact that people couldn't take their normal trips or travel internationally, that people had to drive for their trips. And anecdotally, a large percentage, like over half of the people coming to the Oregon coast were first-time visitors. Now that is mind-blowing because that means people that live within a driving distance of the Oregon coast were coming here for the first time. And what we unfortunately saw with that was a lot of negative visitor behavior. So we saw more trash on the beaches, dogs off leash, more conflict around parking. And so if we think now that there's these people that maybe haven't had the privilege of growing up like we did in these types of areas, they don't know how riptides work and king tides work, how can we be more supportive and sort of onboarding them to our way of life? So when it comes to messaging, could we start having more of our signage in Spanish as well, or another language that's relevant? So we're looking at how we can kind of curb the impacts, the negative impacts of new visitation to the Oregon coast and be more welcoming to this next generation of explorers. And then thirdly, in this sort of diversity space is looking at how we can honor Nescoen's past with the tribes that live there. You know, people in our area know there's Nescoen, Nestaka, Nyakani, Nehalem, they all start with NE in the Salish language that means like place of. And so we have this really interesting, like the story of Southwind goes right through Nescoen. So how can we, when we're bringing tons of people to this place that is the traditional gathering grounds, I'm sure Proposal Rockin' has a deeper meaning to the tribes here. How can we acknowledge those tribes and make sure people understand the importance of it when they're coming here to play with their dog or have these wonderful memories? Sometimes that's through signage. That could be partnering with the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. So sorry to throw all that diversity talk in there, but it's something really cool to think about now, so that we're really helping our generations, a couple generations from now, to kind of know the importance of our spaces. And then the second thing, which I think we're starting to see some questions, or we saw some questions, is how do we start determining the carrying capacity of a destination? So at what point do we say we have too many people here? Because maybe to someone from Southern California, they think, wow, this is great. This is like nothing compared to where I'm from. But somebody who's lived here for 50 years might say, there's 10 people on the beach on a December morning. We have way too many people here. So there's different ways that we can measure this. The parking lots full 7 days in a row, we're at capacity. There's like a number of ways we can measure that. But when you have that identified, then it's not a matter of my opinion versus Sarah's opinion. It's like our community has identified that our natural resources can't take this amount of people. So now we need to take some steps to mitigate that. So how do we determine the carrying capacity? And then who measures that? So does state parks going to say, is it up to them to decide when we have too many people? Is that up to our community residents? Is that up to ODOT? So who gets to decide that? Again, so it's not me saying like, I'm Arica Sears, the undeclared mayor of Nescoen, and there's too many people here. Because again, that's where we start seeing conflict. Especially we don't know who will be living here in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. It might not be this great group of people that are really tight. So kind of determining that ahead of time can really help us mitigate some of that conflict. And then what do we do if there is too many people according to our definitions? Oregonians do not like rules. Oregonians do not like to be told they can't go on the beach or that they have to pay to park. So if you're going to invest now in messaging to say, we're full, go somewhere else, or are we going to say we're shutting down the beaches? And that's kind of a big conversation right now. How can we avoid the problem? Because we know that unlike maybe Californians, our neighboring states, Oregonians do not like rules. So that was a lot of information, but just those were some of the things that came to mind when I was thinking about this conversation. And to tie it back into that book that I was mentioning, one of the main takeaways from that book is that our communities have always responded to the environmental impacts, to the political impacts. And you'll see all those examples, none of them were proactive in mitigating that. So it's so amazing to see this group coming together and trying to decide these things now, so that we're not just continuing this cycle of just reacting to what's happening to us over and over and over, but being a little more proactive in deciding what we want and how it looks. So I'm going to put that link in the chat box for the book, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. That was excellent, Arica. Thank you. We have received several requests for that link already, so I'm glad that you're going to post that there. And I think you helped respond to that one question that came in earlier, so I appreciate that as well. So I'm sure that there are other questions for you. We'll just give it a minute or so.
Yeah, and I think with that, I'm also talking about recreation. It looks different. So maybe recreation to me means being outside with my dog on his leash, listening to the ocean, relaxing. But recreation to somebody else could be having music blasting with 6 of your friends and like having a good time on the beach. So sometimes it is important to think that we all experience the outdoors differently. You know, so there's not, you know, maybe you can't have a rule that's like no boom boxes on the beach, but it is important to think that we're making rules around things that are interpreted and are experienced differently.
Great. So,
well, I think you did such a great job, and there's no questions for you. Ran, I'm sorry, you were going to say something?
Yeah, so just one point, at Nescoen, where the visitors come, that's a real nexus of a lot of different issues. There, in the winter, we experience flooding in right where the bridge is and comes into the village. We have the state park with restrooms right there next to the creek, and over time, we know the water's rising from the ocean, and there'll be more flooding in that area. So the very place where all visitors are welcome to come is the state wayside, and yet in many ways, its future is questionable because there's flooding there, and there may be a pinch spot there because we have all the water from the golf course, the marsh, Hawk Creek, all coming right into our creek, right where the bridge is, and we have a parking lot there. And we have a new egress road coming through there. It's a crazy amalgam of things. And I think that it'd be really valuable for the community to look seriously at that area and understand what part of it might serve a natural function for the creek to have a swale and be able to breathe and expand and contract, and balance that with what we really have to offer recreationally, since our current state wayside has no way to get safely to the beach. We're working on an improvement of a beach access, but all those people come down and they have nowhere to go on their trail. They go searching through the village for ways to get to the beach. So we have some real issues in our basic infrastructure in Neskowin to answer, and the community plan should be a really great opportunity to look at physically what is there, physically all 368 days a year, what transpires there and what needs to be a priority, most vehemently about what that creek's behavior is and how it was probably constricted at one point to serve us, but it's as water gets higher, we may need to have amenities for the creek to be healthy and for flooding to occur less on the west side. So we have some real specific recreational areas that need infrastructural attention, that need a balance of what the natural needs and what we have for needs. It's a great opportunity to take a real big hard look at the future of the village, because that's a weak point right now of where water actually gets behind us and creates a peninsula. So this is a great opportunity we have, and I hope we'll all spend some time down there scratching our heads and looking at it going, how can we make this work?
I would add to one of the trends we're seeing, and that I think you probably saw this winter, is we're seeing more visitation during the winter, right?
Yeah.
Which is totally unfortunate, unless people want to start rowboating as a business, that people are coming more towards the winter. But we're seeing that because we're seeing the startup of Zoom towns. People don't need to work in a physical office, and kids aren't going to school in their place. So we're literally seeing Zoom towns where people are like, I'd rather spend the winter in Neskowin than stuck in Portland. So when we're looking at some of the economic gains, is how can we be sort of more supportive of this winter visitation? That's a great example right there. People can't even enter because it's flooded, for example. And in the long run, if we're going to see worse conditions every winter, but every year due to climate change, what are some climate change mitigation efforts that we could be doing in our community as well? Neskowin is very unique in that you are like an area. Lincoln City is like 8 miles spread out, but Neskowin is very much in one area. You clearly have a store, a hotel. You don't have like 50 million businesses trying to work together. It's a small enough community that you could really be like a green destination, a sustainable destination. You have the Oregon Coast Trail going right through Neskowin. That's a fantastic outdoor recreational asset. That means people that hike are generally environmentally minded. Most likely they're not going to try to hike Cascade Head. Most people go north to south. They're probably gonna take a rest before they do that. So they'll probably have dinner at Hawk Creek, stay at your local hotel, grab food at the grocery store, and hike out the next morning. So looking at some of these different demographics, we'd rather have hikers that aren't bringing a car at all than a tour bus full of people that wanna go shopping, right? So Neskowin really is set up to be more of an environmentally minded, lower impact kind of community, if that's the kind of people it's asking for. So some good points there. Brenda's
I like that, a green destination. All right, there were no
Wait, I had a question, Chris.
Brenda has one.
I can ask it, or it's in the chat if you want to read
Oh,
it.
go ahead and ask it, Brenda.
So Arica, I was curious, as someone who's involved in conflict resolution, you described this conflict, I guess the recreational conflict between how two different types of folks would see the use of an area. So I'm very curious, are there strategies for resolving those conflicts from like the tourism industry, and what, if so, what are they?
So yes, and I'm sure that there are a number of other wonderful destinations like my own that manage this. And I have a podcast called Big Tourism. So I interview people nationally and internationally about managing destinations. So totally fascinated by the subject. But when it comes to us on the Oregon coast, a lot of what we see conflict come out of is people that haven't been here before, like kind of, I hate saying misbehaving because it's like they don't know that they are. There's a group on the North Coast that manages tourism, and we're trying to call it like next generation explorers, right? It just sounds a little kinder than being like, you're acting up. But anyways, a lot of the conflict comes because they're like, their dog is off leash, it's like running all over you, they've never packed it in, packed it out, so they're like, there's no trash can, no problem, I'll throw it. So a lot of what my entity is doing is like proactive stewardship messaging. So we're looking at the key markets that come to the Oregon coast and try to message and provide the information, kind of like, this is how we do it here, and not in a mean way, like in a creative way, in an inviting way. This summer, we're experimenting a little with geofencing. So it's kind of creepy. I don't have to get totally into it, but I can virtually put a geofence around an area. So I could pick like Hot Creek restaurant. When someone walks into that virtual fencing, I can message them. People generally do it to sell something, like the best restaurant in town is just 1 more mile away. But the message I'm giving them is like, keep your dog on leash. So that's an experiment. We'll see how it goes. I'm sure Josh can speak more to conflict on trails when there's a multi-use trail, like a hiker, mountain biker, and a horseback rider. That's a lot of what we see too on larger trails. And a lot of times signage can help with that. I tell our agency partners, like, let's make it as easy as possible for people to do the right thing. So if we want people to throw away their trash, let's get as many trash cans out there that are obviously there. We don't want people going to the bathroom on the beach, bring them a bathroom. So I'm all about making it as easy as possible. But Josh, maybe you've seen some solutions in other destinations around, or your own trail conflict use.
Yeah, so within the mountain bike user group, certainly the hiker, biker, equestrian conflict is something that comes up quite often. And just trail trends are generally leaning towards specific user groups being utilizing the trail network. And so if you're riding a mountain bike and you're going 15 miles per hour around a blind corner, you're not going to run into a family of a family with kids and or a critter like a horse or something like that coming up the trail as you're descending. So that's just generally the newest practices, kind of moving away from multi-use and multi-direction and going with more directional trails and user specific. So it kind of gets people all in the same vein of user group, utilizing that space. So that's something within the mountain bike, user group that we've been practicing for the last 10 years or so.
That makes a lot of sense. Just having, I used to ride horses and I also like to bike and hike, and I don't think all that goes together. So just
Absolutely. Yeah, and they found over the years that it just doesn't work for a lot of the, especially equestrian and mountain bikers. They both are user groups that can go at speed, and so there's conflict there. There are opportunities that can be kind of shared. If you have a biking trail that's a climb route, it could certainly be something where that user group, the mountain bikers, are going to be going at a much slower speed. It's directional, so they'll be going uphill. If it was a multi-use, such as a hiker, biker user group, then you can have a family safely walking up and utilizing that same trail network, exploring, seeing the same views that the mountain bikers get to see, with less user conflict. We won't be descending down those trails. So that's generally the way that they've been kind of lessening the impact there. Yeah.
All right.
And I see a question from Catherine. It says, how does a community help educate visitors to our culture? Should an HOA association provide trash cans? But how do we get visitors on the same page? And so I would say this is something, I'm sure Sarah could talk more about this, but very challenging in South Tillamook County. Most places that I work with have a city council, they have a mayor, they have a city manager, they have this built-in structure that there will always be someone there to kind of help carry these plans. But in Pacific City, Terra Mar, Nesquin, we're all unincorporated. It makes it a little more, it's not impossible. It is just a little more challenging to carry on these strategies years after year because, you know, people move on and move to different places. But I would say, you know, you have Visit Tillamook Coast as a partner. They're your county marketing destination. So if you said, hey, this group of 60 people got together and we really want to be known as blank destination, we really want this type of visitor, we really need help with trash cans, like they are the best person to talk to. They're your local organization. I can, sorry, go ahead, Sarah, if you want to jump in.
So actually, what Arica is referring to, we have started that momentum with Visit Tillamook Coast, or the Tillamook Coast Visitors Association, which I think they are now referred to as. And what we're working on right now is some development of positive messaging, community messaging, and putting together a group that will hopefully have an opportunity to come and visit with the residents and get your feedback. Randall is aware of these efforts. We have reached out to the CAC chairs for some preliminary guidance in our hopes to come to the communities, especially Pacific City, especially Nescoin, and especially Oceanside, where we know there's a lot happening and there's a lot of community need that exists and there's a lot of conflict. And working together to get the right messaging out for visitors and guests is going to be critical, especially in preparation for what we're anticipating to be a very busy season. And so just know we're coming. These efforts are underway. There's a lot of energy and there's a lot of support for community residents. And Visit Tillamook Coast, or the Tillamook Coast Visitors Association. It's going to take me a while to get that flip right where I don't have to repeat it. But we are on our way, and it is probably within the next 4 to 6 weeks that we will be reaching out to the CAC to see if there's an opportunity to visit with everyone about the efforts that are underway for messaging.
So Sarah,
yes.
Go ahead, Susan.
Hi there. Yeah, I just wanted to comment because, you know, in Nescoin, when we deal with Memorial Day, 4th of July, we have a neighborhood association. We have the Nescoin Community Association. And over the last number of years, we're the ones that are buying the porta potties. And in some cases, Tillamook Coast, I think this last year paid for them. But we've got dumpsters at all of the access points. And so we've tried as an association to really, you know, address the issue. And for the most part, I think we're kind of lucky. We don't have a lot of trash on the beach, you know, when we put these receptacles out. And Nan has been really, really helpful with us to help pay for that. Because as you know, we get inundated and, you know, there's a dumpster and there's porta potties, you know, at the wayside and that kind of thing. And so we've, you know, I think each community, and I think as through the chamber in Pacific City, we're talking about, you know, kind of the same thing of in our own different way, you know, because we're not a city and we don't have a city council and we don't, you know, really have all the money, but we do, but the NCAC, you know, really has been really supportive in Nescoin. So if we can just get people not to park in our driveways, that would help, but that's not going to happen. So anyway, just wanted to make that point.
And we also put up signs trying to find friendly language that would be like, they wouldn't just throw a rock at it. You know, it was a balance of friendly and asking people to respect our village that we've tried to make a nice place to live. And so we even tried signage. I don't know how effective it was, but we were trying to find measures somehow that spoke to this change of conditions. And
Yeah.
so it's great that the county's, doing that and supporting that in a great way.
Well,
NC's been
Fran,
great.
your signs looked great. And I do think it was a reminder when people walk down there that, hey, this might be a destination for the family for the weekend, but people live here. And that, you need to be, and the majority of people are, I mean, they're happy to be here, especially when it's a nice day, but there's always that group that, we go down on the beach on 4th of July, which, is typical, but, we're always picking up somebody's trash, or my garbage can is always full on those weekends because they go, oh, there's a garbage can just right out for the taking. And so, we have to work through it, but, I guess all in all, we're all lucky to work, work and live here. But we also have to realize that, it needs to be shared, and that hopefully the people, the majority of people are very respectful. That's my 2 cents.
So,
All right, we had one question come in just now. Might we get representation of state parks and U.S. Forest Service as the primary recreation in Neskowin is the state beaches and Cascade Head Reserve. So we have had panelists representing U.S. Forest Service on our town halls in the past, but it wasn't on topics goals 8 and 9. Okay, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. I got corrected.
As far as state parks goes, they, last year, due to people not being able to camp, their budgets were cut significantly, and they basically had to lay off the majority of their staff statewide. And in the past, where we've seen beach rangers were taken off the beach and put onto campgrounds. So we didn't see a lot of state parks this year, but they are forecasting a normal budget, and they are around. In our area, we just got a new manager named Jason, who lives, like I said, in Lamar. I know where his house is if you want to go, I don't know, say hi or egg it or whatever. But it is always great to talk to state parks. And I think they are very friendly and very open to working on community relationships. And Michelle and I, with the Tillamook County Wellness, with the Access Physical Activity Group, have talked about doing a walking group that was mentioned earlier in Pacific City, but walking with people like your state parks park manager to just start building that relationship, getting to know what they're up to, and maybe in less of a town hall where it's like question and answer and people are getting heated, but learning about each other's work, for an opportunity for them to learn about what you're concerned about and seeing. So either you can feel free to join the Pacific City walking group, because we'll hopefully have a state parks person at some point, or we can maybe set up like a Neskowin walking group, or just to start forming those relationships so that your management agencies like state parks, like U.S. Fish and Wildlife, are aware of what the desires of your community are, so that they can be working on that with you. And I think it's always great to build those relationships.
I'm not sure which goal it's going to be, but we're going to try and get, I'm speaking with state parks because we have a beach access project. And so I'm hoping to bring them into the conversation about the wayside and the beach access and their trail that doesn't work. And I don't want to put them before a firing squad here for all these terrible things. We try to approach it as, how can we approach solutions together, to work together to solve some of the issues for our community, and it might be an opportunity then for the this group on the town halls to ask some questions directly, because often we don't have the answers. So you have to go to these folks. So someone representing Cascade Head and I think Fish and Wildlife and the parks will occupy one of the town halls. And we didn't get everyone here tonight. We didn't have all those folks, but I think there's an interest in getting them here. So we'll sort out which goal, or it may have its own town hall.
So in Rand, especially U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the goal 16 and 17 for estuary and shorelands, and then OPRD is goal 18. So yes, we will definitely, there's places to fit them in. I would ask quickly, Chris, Michelle has put some great information in the chat. I think she thought of a couple of more things to share with the group. Would you mind if we gave her a couple of minutes to talk quickly about what she shared?
Sure, that'd be fine. Great.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, I've already forgotten half of what I chatted in, and but I do think, just to loop back to a question that Sarah posed earlier about, and just the general topic of the potential for being inundated with tourism volume. I think it's really important that we have the intellectually honest conversation that it is happening and it will happen. This is a beautiful, amazing place. I mean, this is one of the most amazingly beautiful, natural, and pristine places, I think, in the world. I don't think we're going to be able to gate it. It's been discovered and people are going to keep coming. So the importance of being proactive as a community is really important, and being really thoughtful. And a lot of the conversations that I've been involved in tangentially, or I've been the convener for, have really been centered around this. This is a reality. How do we take this and make it as constructive as possible for all the users, for everyone's benefit? How do we minimize negative impacts and optimize the potentially positive ones? A lot of both of those were talked about. One of the key things that I felt has been missing for a long time, and I've been in many, many conversations with many people in the county, including all of our current and past county commissioners over the last several years, has been the need for a designated, dedicated coordinator for county trails and recreational amenities. We have the tourism dollars flowing into the pipeline to provide some revenue for facilities and destination management needs. Contrary to a lot of people's belief, it's not all going to marketing. It really is going into destination management and a lot of what you guys are working on planning for. The challenge is there is a tool that the county has that was developed through a consultant to kind of align how those resources are allocated based on the community priorities that are developed by groups like yours. There still wasn't a good hub of coordination for all of these amazing and important recreational priorities. And so I'm hopeful. Commissioner Aaron Scar is working with our group to identify a path for funding at least an interim trails and recreation coordinator position that would help tap into the work that you're doing in Nescoin, or the work that's being done around the Oregon Coast Trail or the Salmonberry, and bring these collaborative, or, you know, I would consider you all, what you're doing here, to be collaborative. And there needs to be a process that those priorities, those community level or project level priorities, get filtered back up to this funding mechanism that the county is sitting on with the transient lodging tax dollars. So there's some infrastructure that was needed for that to happen. And I think that those pieces are getting put into place. And it's a little bit premature for me to say that, but I think that it's going to be in place and it will help with whatever you're doing. And just to give like a really weirdly specific example, I don't know if it's Randall or Randy, you were talking about when it floods and people are walking all through the neighborhoods to get to the beach. If that's a priority for your community, how can you work together to say, okay, this is going to keep happening, so let's pick this path, let's augment it and sign it and protect it and promote it as the alternate route, rather than having everybody's backyards get trampled through or whatever it is. So those are the kinds of things that you can be building into your plan, and then the costs for those things can get filtered upstream to the county seat, where there might be some dollars that could be allocated. But they need help from communities like yours to say, this is what we really need right now. This is the most important thing. We have this amount of money to spend. Who gets to decide how that gets prioritized? And it really should be you.
We're actually in that very process trying to make the roads and the beach accesses that exist and people can get to the primary route. We're on our third design for how to solve that problem, but we're getting there, I think, and hopefully it'll be in place by the summer. But you're correct. You try to solve that problem, and I hope we'll prioritize a number of things in the next 2 years so that we can focus on solving those issues. All the beach accesses kind of need attention, and we're trying to get that on a permanent basis and have the county help possibly.
Well, Sarah, I think we're ready to wrap this up. We've had some very good dialogue. We've had some great presenters and some good questions.
So thank you, Chris. So yeah, so just to quickly tie everything back around to the goal 8 component of the conversation with NESCO and community. And then I do want to make sure that quickly I can at least address some of Sarah's question about the pitfalls. Because I think that will help with the development of questions that you guys are thinking about as you move forward, especially with any type of survey effort. So quickly, the NESCO community plan response is that NESCO has many recreational opportunities, and it highlights golfing, horseback riding, hiking, an RV park, fishing. And so these are amenities that you already have. And I know that there is that undeveloped property in the North Nescoan area that's zoned recreation management, that's currently owned by the county. And I know that that's an area of strong interest. So looking at what has currently been inventoried, but what you're looking for in the future, when you move through the process of a potential survey and working through this part of the community plan, the first step would be to really look at that inventory. And has there been an adequate effort to really outline and determine what the community wants and desires are? With that, finding properties or areas and recreational improvements that are appropriate. Are they in balance and are they in harmony with the area? So you've heard, tonight Josh talking about having to go through a NEPA review. We've talked about how we love our natural amenities to death, right? And I think Cape Kiwanda is one of those. When you're talking about your waysides, and Susan's talking about the efforts of the NCAC to help manage solid waste and garbage, so that our areas literally aren't being trashed. And we're talking about that positive messaging and restrooms. Those are all really important components when we talk about what type of recreational amenities and opportunities do we want for our community, and how do we take care of them to make sure that our naturally sensitive areas remain preserved. And with those recreational amenities, and I'll use the golf course as an example, because the golf course in the area north of the golf course specifically is protected under the shorelands element. So when we get to that part, we'll talk about that a little bit more. But what you're going to find is that most of your recreational areas are also naturally sensitive areas. There's environmental concerns. And when we look at how we plan for these areas, and we look at maintaining that harmony and that balance and that protection, what you're going to find is often for these recreational areas, only low impact types of development are allowed. So when we're talking about the beach access ramps, there's certain types of development that are permissible and some that are not. Or when we're looking at the Nescoan emergency egress route or boardwalks, or why are only types of hiking activities allowed in certain areas? Well, that's typically for a reason, and it has to do with that balance that goes with protecting these areas as we enjoy them. There's the cultural and heritage component of it. Education is a huge piece of this. So as you think about how you want to plan for recreational amenities in your communities, the education component, aside from the work that we have underway with Visit Tillamook Coast and others, and the great work that Arica is doing, we can educate our guests as they're walking through these recreation areas or they're biking through these recreation areas. Putting up, you know, even if it's not a kiosk, but just something that educates them, that gives them a deeper appreciation and an understood value of these areas. And it doesn't have to be in restrictive ways. Lastly, talking about diversity, multimodal opportunities, and accessibility. And that is across the board for all folks, you know, that come from different types of backgrounds or have different types of financial means. Making sure that you're able to meet everybody's recreational needs. So when you're looking at your inventory, where you want to go, what your priorities are for enhancements or creation or improvement, making sure that it's accessible. That's a big piece of this. And you know, starting with your community, but then also to others that enjoy your area. So that would be how I would tie that back into goal 8 and what the purpose is and why that's important for your community plan.
Thank you, Sarah. Just wanted to remind everybody that this session has been recorded, and we'll be posting that in the next few days on our site. And stay tuned for announcements on our next informational town hall, which will be focused on goal 10, which is housing. And that will be, I think that's scheduled for March 23rd. So thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.